Now, we're going to be talking about Walsh Trust today, and in researching for this broadcast, I learned something very interesting about Walsh. Walsh stands for West Auckland Living Skills Home Trust, and it was established 30 years ago, and that's why we have the Walsh CEO, Rob Warriner, in the studio to help mark this 30-year milestone and talk about highlights at Walsh over 3 decades. Walsh is a leader in community-based mental health services. It's located in Henderson, West Auckland, an independent charitable trust with funding coming from government contracts and charitable donations. And Walsh Trust has a very interesting philosophy. It's based on the fundamental belief that people can recover from mental ill health. Recovery in the Walsh on the Walsh website is defined as the ability to live well in the presence or absence of one's mental ill health. Pretty challenging. That, Rob, to
it is,
recovery and living either in the presence or the absence of one's mental health. Anyway, it's great. Welcome to take it from us. Perhaps you'd like to list some of Walsh's services first up.
Sure. And thanks for your welcome, Sheldon. It's great to be here. The main services that Walsh offers today involve mobile community home-based support services, where we have staff visiting people either in the community or in their own homes. We also have a number of residential rehabilitation, I guess they used to be called, still are, homes where people who have more significant support needs, who may require support 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we have staff there supporting them. We have, and it actually goes back to my introduction to the mental health business, we have an employment service which supports people with mental illness into employment, mainstream employment that any one of us may choose to apply for. We have an older person's respite service. We have peer support, which is very much a growing element of what we're offering in 2018. And the most recent service, which we began about, I think it was 2015, is maternal mental health, respite, and again, community support. And actually, 2 weeks ago, we were incredibly blessed in that service received an achievement award at the Australia-New Zealand Mental Health Services Conference in Adelaide.
The themes
absolutely thrilled about that, yeah.
Oh, congratulations. I think that maternity unit is an example of Walsh's innovation, and that it seemed that you partnered up with G.J. Gardner Homes and one other party that I just can't recall, but it looked to me to be a real cooperative and collaborative project.
Very much so, and I think that sort of harks back to Walsh Trust values in terms of being part of the community. Part of the community in which we operate and provide services. And so getting G.J. Gardner's on board, getting our local communities on board with us too, it's been quite fundamental and key to kind of any success of our services, but certainly really, really important for our maternal services.
Yeah, well, it seemed to me to be a very good example, very innovative, and bringing the commercial sort of sector, the corporate sector, into mental health. It's a partnership that's worked.
It has, and it's been quite a deliberate strategy too. I mean, when I think back over certainly the time I've been at Walsh, connecting with the community and ensuring we remain connected has been a fundamental. And so, for example, an initiative we undertook some years ago was to make sure that we participated in the local Business Enterprise Awards. In that we are an employer in West Auckland and we're part of the business community. And so we felt it was really important to take our place alongside those other businesses as part of West Auckland. And we gained enormously from that, and I can't stress how much we gained, because We actually entered the Business Awards, and the first couple of years that we did submit entries, the feedback that we got was quite telling in that we were told it sounds like you're doing some really, really good stuff here, but looking at your submission, we can't really understand what it's all about. We were so used to talking to people of our sector, of our industry.
In the mental health jargon.
Absolutely, in the mental health jargon. And here we are talking about being a community organisation, and yet when we're talking to the community, they couldn't understand what we're talking about.
Well, when I joined mental health about 12 years ago, people were talking about these CSWs and CLSs, and I thought, well, this is a jargon that it would be meaningless to the outside world or even the community that we're supposed to be working in.
Absolutely, and it was such a profound lesson for us. And we got our act together, we knuckled down, and eventually we did actually win the local Business Enterprise Awards. Huge lesson for us, though.
Right. But a great example of you being responsive to what was required in the community to do well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, that's absolutely wonderful. I had a look at your website and your annual report last year, and you talk in there about some charismatic founders and single-minded individuals who founded Walsh. Who were some of these people?
Well, the first chief executive at Walsh Trust was a gentleman called Clive Hullett. An incredibly dynamic character, well known in West Auckland as a community leader, a community worker, and someone who certainly ticks the box in terms of a charismatic person. One of those people who you're often quite appreciative of the fact that, for the most part, you agree with them. Being on the other side of the table could be quite a daunting experience.
Well, not a control freak.
Not at all, but certainly someone who was very passionate about what he believed in, very persuasive, not easily put off his path, and as I say, had a gift, as do many charismatic people, of being able to engage people with their passion, with their commitment, bring people on board and create movements. And I think that's very much about what was happening in the late 1980s. And there's people like Clive, Elaine Underwood, who again was a renowned, passionate visionary in West Auckland. Others I remember from those days on the North Shore, Margaret Beats. Very passionate, charismatic people who, I guess I always make the point at work that while we can be pleased with what we're doing and take some pride in it for sure, we actually ride in the coattails of many people that went before us and did some really tough work breaking new ground.
Yeah. When you talk about their passion, was it a passion for mental health or a passion for care, providing care for people in the community?
I should think when you ask that question, it's probably neither of those. It was a passion for people. And I think that was probably the point of difference, in that certainly in the era of the 1980s, early 90s, we were still very much talking about former psychiatric patients. We used to talk about patients who had been released from Carrington or patients who escaped from Carrington. And so I think that their passion for people was a really profound point of difference that I think contributed enormously to the movement that became the development of a non-government community-based sector.
Yeah, well, we're actually going to be talking next week to Murray Henschel, who was the founder of the community mental health, a pioneer in community mental health organisations, and one of the founders of Framework. So he, I think, certainly had a vision. Yeah. I understand that they actually took a model from the UK, and you're from the UK. Was that your understanding?
Actually, I don't know. I don't think so. I'm not aware of it, so I could be wrong. But my sense from talking with people that are around and talking with Clive too over the years, I think, again, a point of difference is that the model, if you put it that way, that was developed, that guided Walsh Trust, was very much based upon being responsive to the needs of the Waitakere community. Mm. And I think that was probably, again, a point of difference in that coming in with a response that was driven by the ground up rather than imposed and coming from the top down.
Right.
So probably some of the main questions I imagine Clive and his colleagues would have been more interested in would be, what's needed here? What do we need to do?
Right.
And with the emphasis on we.
Yeah. Well, that's a lovely sentiment. I mean, you've sort of got a defined area, haven't you? Mm. You've got in West Auckland, and Walsh is sort of in the centre of it. It
is, and I joined Walsh in 2003 after sort of working on the North Shore for about a good 10 years. And just to reinforce your point, Sheldon, one of the first irritant, it was an irritant at the time, to be frank. Forever I seem to be told, Rob, you've got to realise it's very, very different over here.
You've got to be a Westie.
Absolutely. and they were so true. They were so true. It was a rich communities, but very proud, very parochial, and very aware and proud of their point of difference. And so it is a very, very different place to work, and I love it. Really enjoy it. Yeah. Right.
Well, you mentioned point of difference. Is that something that Walsh is proud of?
Very much so, yeah. We're not the largest organisation in the world, and it's been quite a deliberate strategy, if you like, particularly during the 1990s and earlier in the new millennium, where there's a sense of we need to grow to sustain ourselves, we just need to grow, as what we do. Walsh Trust, I do remember the board meetings discussing this, took a very deliberate approach of wanting to be a niche organisation that was responsive to West Auckland Waitakere communities. And I think it's worked very, very well. Excuse me, it's been quite challenging at times because there is sort of some sense of, I think, a greater critical mass in terms of sustainability, having a larger organisation. But what we have found is that there's very much a sense of, and this is feedback from staff, a sense of what Walsh Trust feels like is so important, and something that we really do need to value and sustain, and which makes Walsh Trust, and it'd be so tragic to lose that.
Mm. Have you had any of the big boys knocking on the door wanting to take you over?
We've had one or two, yes, absolutely.
Right.
Politely declined.
Right. Well, it sounds as though you've got a good model working there, and I'm sure that you know a lot about, or Walsh Trust knows a lot about the West Auckland community, and that you're probably responding to that community.
Yeah, and that's very much at the heart of what Walsh Trust is about. And certainly when I first arrived there, something I learned very quickly too, that the lifeblood of Walsh Trust is the West Auckland community. You can't separate the two.
And we're talking today to Rob Warriner, the CEO of Walsh Trust, which is celebrating its 30 years in community mental health. And Rob has given us a bit of a rundown on its service.
We see not just Walsh Trust, but I guess our philosophy is about looking at NGOs as community resources that enable and empower communities to, I guess, take care of their own, if I can put it that way. And so, as I said earlier, we see ourselves as stewards of an organisation, of a resource, which is not just part of the West Auckland community, but belongs to the West Auckland community. And so it's quite a privilege as well as a quite responsibility, being a steward of that resource, taking care of it. And part of that is ensuring that it's there for the future as well. It's there for the long term, not just for us to make good use of it and then it actually fades away.
Well, what other ways, you mentioned the business awards where you've had success there, what other inroads have you got, I guess, outside of just offering services? Are there other initiatives that you take in West Auckland to gain a profile there?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned we had an employment service, and I guess a key part of that service is connecting daily with employers, and again, principally around West Auckland. And so engaging with employers and gaining their support, engaging with schools and high schools is a part of our business that we've just been getting into the last few years. Basically, engagement. It's almost a key element of what makes us what we are as well, because we can't be an island unto ourselves. And if a core part of our role is to support people to become participating members of the community, we have to ensure that as an organisation we're modelling that ourselves, we're doing that. We can't operate in isolation and then support others to try and engage with the community. It just wouldn't work.
Right. I mean, in terms of employment services, I guess I've always been a bit confused about the whole issue of disclosure.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that? I mean, clearly Walsh Trust is a mental health organisation,
yep.
And if you are an employment consultant working for Walsh Trust, then there's no secret that these people that you're trying to get jobs for have got lived experience.
Yep.
So that's straight up, is it?
It's basically we're led by the person, the job seeker, as to whether or not they want to disclose. Our employment service, we have a specific brand for that called Employment Works. And that enables us to connect with employers. For example, years ago, we might have rung up an employer and we said, we're from Walsh Trust, and obviously they're wanting to know what's this got to do with me. So ring it up and say, we're from Employment Works. Straight away, there's a connection. We do, as I say, offer, and it's very much led by the job seeker as to whether they want to disclose, how much they want to disclose to the employer. Some choose to, some prefer not to. And we adapt and tailor the support services we provide accordingly.
So having reasonable success in placing people?
We do. This year's actually, the last 12 months, we've been breaking records in terms of employment. And that's about, obviously, an economy that's going well, but also we've got some incredibly passionate, skilled and effective employment consultants working for us. And the longer we can hold on to them, the better. They're great. And
what do you think work means for those people that have lived experience?
Beg your pardon?
What do you think work means? You know, how important is work for those of us with lived experience?
It means everything. And I say that from the point of view of, you know, when we meet people we've not met before, one of the first, second or third questions is, well, what do you do? And I know when I was working as an employment consultant, people who get a job, it's almost like they've been given a new drug, probably an illegal drug, because their mood changes, their outlook on life changes virtually overnight, in that they have a new identity, not solely based around their mental illness, not solely based around receiving a benefit from wins, not solely based around looking at a history of illness, trauma or whatever.
Well, this is Mental Health Radio, taken from us on Planet FM 104.6, and we're talking today to the CEO of Walsh Trust, Rob Warriner. Walsh is about to celebrate 30 years in community mental health, specifically in West Auckland, and Rob's been talking a lot about the connection of Walsh Trust with that area.
My point I made earlier about how mental health services need to be connected and engage with communities. I think that's the key part of it, in that it's not just from the point of view of it's a nice thing to do. I think it's probably the core of it is actually ensuring that we remain relevant. The best example I can think of to describe that was my experienced actually embarrassment when I attended the tangi of a young man who was a friend of my son at school, who in many ways statistically was perfect in that we know so much about him. He was Māori, he was male, he was young, he came from a home where the parents separated. He got involved in drugs and violence and gangs. And to cut a long story short, after he was released from prison, he was expecting twins with his girlfriend, and things were looking really up for him. He took his life. And speaking to his mum at the tangi, and she was aware of the work that I do, and she said to me, Rob, I'm so wish we could have got him to come and speak to you before this happened. And what struck me like a thunderbolt was, and I would have done what? In terms of thinking about the resources that I have at my disposal, if you like, at Walsh Trust, and the connections that I have, what dawned on me there, again, was the distance between the life that he was leading, that he was part of, his reality, and the reality of mental health services. That there was a huge void between the two. And so, for me, that really reinforced again the importance of challenging ourselves to ensure our relevance to people living in communities in Aotearoa, in our communities, and how we need to be connected to their living lives, sometimes struggling with lives, rather than solely relying on our diagnostic categories and our treatment interventions and so on and so forth.